Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in about 5 more minutes to give everyone some time to log in. And thank you again for joining us. Good evening, everyone. This is Rebecca, Director of Alumni Relations. I want to thank you all for joining us for our JeffMD Educating Physicians Who Will Serve, Lead, and Discover. So just a few notes for this evening. If you are joining us by telephone, please make sure to mute your telephones, and then please feel free to also submit any questions during the presentation by using your question box, and we'll be able to get to those at the end of the presentation. Just to give you an idea of people who are joining us this evening, we have more than 50 alumni from 22 states. So it's great to be able to speak with a lot of you that we may not be able to see in our in-person events. Our speaker this evening is Dr. Tykocinski, and he'll give you a little bit more background about himself as we get started, but we want to thank him again for joining us this evening. For those of you outside of the Philadelphia area, we are coming to a lot of different locations. So we will be in New Orleans on Friday, Florida, Arizona, and also a few events here in Philadelphia. So hopefully you'll be able to join us in person as well as on our online events. We are also planning for the summer and fall of 2018. So if any of you have any ideas, if you're willing to volunteer as a speaker, or if any of you have reunions coming up for Alumni Weekend this year, please feel free to reach out to us at alumni@jefferson.edu. And now I'd like to give over the presentation to Dr. Tykocinski.
Welcome, alumni. It's great to have you online, and I'm really excited to share with you our progress on the new JeffMD curriculum. And it's the only bio of myself that I'll give you is that I've been here at Jefferson for close to 9.5 years now. So I'm clearly a veteran of our great medical college. The JeffMD name, by the way, was generated by our medical students. So we had a little bit of an internal naming contest, decided not to go out to some branding firm. And when we heard JeffMD, we went with it since everything's Jeff something around here. Before I get into the curriculum itself, though, I just want to set the stage, because a question at the very beginning is, why fix it if it ain't broken? You know, we've had a great curriculum, fine-tuned over years and even decades. So what would prompt us to blow up our current curriculum and introduce this entirely new one under the JeffMD banner? And in part, the explanation is that as we sit here in the medical college, we're really looking at a future for medicine that we believe is going to be radically different than the one we're at. I'd like to say that human knowledge is at an inflection point, human technology is at an inflection point, and human society is at an inflection side. As we go with our byline of redefining humanly possible. And we really have to open our eyes that what the professions are, what jobs are, how that will play out in the coming decade, 2 or 3, is going to be introduce radical changes in what we do. And even as physicians, we're not going to be immune, and maybe even because we're physicians, we will be more immune, we'll be more susceptible the changes that are going on. What do I mean by inflection point? I'm just going to start with this a set of breakthroughs in 2018 in the world of biomedicine. Some of you may recall that as recently as 15 to 20 years ago, there was a huge debate when the question of whether we should sequence one person's 2 billion base pairs, one human genome, and it was going to cost $3 billion. Well, here we are in 2018, and we're at a $1,000 genome, soon to be your entire genome for the cost of a Starbucks latte. And there was a recent project initiated that's talking about creating a biogenome for the entire 1.5 million known species on planet Earth. So we're going to have vast floods of data in terms of genomics, and every patient will literally come to us with their entire genomic sequence on their card. Gene editing is a major breakthrough of the last couple of years, and this truly revolutionize things. I was just at an award event for Francis Collin, the director at NIH, and not really tongue-in-cheek. When the question of sickle cell came up, he said, well, we may soon be able to just move beyond thinking of therapies because we're going to simply edit out that gene, both in the somatic as well as in the genome. Stem cells are coming of their own. A recent report this year on stem cells being used to cure a form of macular degeneration. Organ printing in 3 dimensions. There was even a uterus transplant this year, and a child was born from a transplanted uterus. What we call diagnostic data, what our students, when they're out in practice, will be changed. Detection of facial and olfactory cues of sickness, as an example. And we're going to personalize not just by knowing everybody's genetic sequence, but for instance, when it comes to an immune repertoire, personalizing immune repertoires by AI. So if we want to get our patient's immune system to attack their cancer, it won't just sort of be a blind trial, but we'll really know their immune system in detail and know exactly how to turn it on. With these kinds of breakthroughs, essentially we have to face a new reality in terms of what's out there. And here's the challenge. We're operating in the present in a fee-for-service world, but we're moving into a value-based purchasing world. The problem is we have to live in both of them during the transition period. We've all been trained in a period when data was king. Most of what you supported when you did lab research was generating data. Well, data is becoming a commodity. If you can sequence the entire human genome for the cost of a latte, well, then it's data interpretation is king. We grew up in an age where the physician is king in the healthcare team. Now it's increasingly the physician's team is king. And of course, we've always gotten used to incremental advances in diagnostics and therapeutics, but really the changes that are upon us are going to be transformational in leaps and bounds as we move forward. So that prompts us to say the way we train med school students has to change. And in fact, we really have to train med students to be lifelong learners because the body of knowledge, how medicine is practiced, will be changing so radically in the course of a student's own lifetime. JeffMD has a number of top-level features to it that we built into the curriculum. At the highest level, there's deep integration of basic and clinical science, which it cuts across both lectures and small groups during all 3 phases of JeffMD, which I'll describe in a minute. And that basic and clinical weaving doesn't just stop in the first year or 2, but continues on to the very end of medical school. There's an emphasis on small group pedagogy. We've drastically reduced the number of lectures. Lectures can be viewed online, and increasingly we've moved to Socratic and other types of small group sessions where you get interactions with the students. And that fosters, in addition to knowledge acquisition, teamwork, leadership, clinical thinking. And that happens very early on. Mandated scholarly inquiry. We have always had a large medical school class. Right now we have the fifth largest medical school class size. It becomes very hard to do individual and track scholarly inquiry projects for students, but we've taken this on under JeffMD. And so now scholarly inquiry research projects, literature search projects will be mandated for all students coming through the system and built into co-curriculum. An intense co-curriculum becomes very important. By the way, the definition here is curriculum is something that generally all students in a class will do. Co-curriculum is a set of options. Some kids will do different co-curricular tracks depending on where they're headed. Another key thing which we'll emphasize as we go through the slides here is elevation of health system science, evidence-based medicine, humanities, professionalism, wellness. These are all higher order information and sensibilities for the 21st century physician. And the students are being exposed to this right from the get-go. many of our students decide to specialize. And so the opportunity for earlier subspecialization is there in JeffMD. It's deeper grounding in students' chosen paths. And then we've always been proud of the extracurriculums, and we're sustaining it in JeffMD at a high level. We have more real community outreach than any other med school in the country that I know of. And fostering institutional citizenship. Even though I'm presenting this, there are two people that I really want to single out. Steve Herron is our Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, and Deb Ziering is our Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. And Deb has taken a particularly hands-on approach towards doing this. The two of them have really spearheaded the introduction of JeffMD for us. But of course, it's not just the two of them. It's literally a cast of hundreds, and the engagement of our faculty as well as students in developing this curriculum is fairly remarkable. This graphic sort of lays out the 4 years of med school and divides it into 3 phases. Phase 1 is now been shortened to 21 months and is where we do a lot of the basic sciences. The second phase, which we traditionally have always thought of as year 3, is 12 months and is the time for clinical rotations. And phase 3 is really the time for specialty interest development. The important thing, though, on this slide is that you'll see at the bottom left, there are a number of threads that continue all the way through the 3 phases of the curriculum. And so you'll see the traditional courses like anatomy, histology, embryology, biochemistry, and they're threaded through the entirety. But at the same time, you now have introduced the health system science, humanities as a requirement, evidence-based medicine, and the other things that you see here on this slide. The 3 phases are shown here, and just to make the following point, if you look at phase 1, which we call the foundations courses, you'll see us marching from introduction to the study of medicine, host defense, blood, moving on to the various systems, cardiopulmonary, etc. The important difference from the past current curriculum here is that it's not a case where the students will take all of anatomy and histology up front and then move on to the systems. But anatomy, histology, the work with the cadavers is threaded through, and they keep working on it as they get to the individual systems. So this is really a systems approach, but it's systems that cuts across all of the cross-cutting disciplines that come through there. And then you see the phase 2, which is the clinical core, which we get to start earlier. And by starting phase 2 earlier, it also means that we extend the time available for phase 3 and the specialty differentiation and the other components that we're incorporating there. So the first class of students to matriculate under JeffMD are here. They started this past fall. The courses in year 1 are the Foundations of Medicine 1 and 2 course, the Scholarly Inquiry, clinical experiences, which start right from the get-go, as well as a requirement for, a first-time requirement for humanities selectives. And I'll explain these things in due course. What I want to start with, though, is the core of the curriculum. And at the heart of it is this case-based learning. What we do is we take Tuesday and Thursday mornings, we divide the students up, and they are given a case per week, and the case is divided over 2 sessions. So they'll start discussing it on Tuesday, but then they will continue on and further develop the case on Thursday of that week. You'll note that the groups are only 9 to 10 students each, which means that we have, with a class size in this particular year of 274 students, that requires 28 groups, which means that we have a tremendous demand. Remember, this is just 1 year. By next year, we'll have 2 concurrent courses, first and second year students. We'll have to have over 56 small group rooms simultaneously to accomplish that, and that is not simple for us in our current classroom configuration, but we'll get there. So the cases unfold in aliquots, the students develop questions and learning issues, and the groups actually stay together for about 12 weeks. And then we re-scramble them. And there's a tremendous bonding that occurs. So leaving their small group after 12 weeks, we've discovered, is sort of like leaving home for the first time to go to college. There's a bit of a trepidation of what their new group will be like once they get there. If you look at a sample schedule here, you'll see now the 2 case-based learning anchors between 10 and noon on the Tuesday and Thursday mornings, preceded by, in this particular case, lab. You'll see that the lectures have now been condensed into Monday and Wednesday. There's more clinical case learning on Friday. And then in the afternoon are some of those threads that I mentioned. So you'll see here introduction to population health. And remember, this is occurring early in the first year of this exposure, and an introduction to the ecological model in this particular case. One of the things we're particularly excited about for our students is health system science. Jefferson happens to be distinguished by having the nation's first college, until recently also only college of population health. There are many colleges of public health, but not population health. And we have this incredible expertise under Dean Nash in areas like patient safety, quality improvement, and the other areas that you see here. So and the exposure of the students comes early and steadily as the curriculum unfolds. And we're, you know, obviously this is a bit of an experiment, but we're excited about the prospect of our students gaining a level of sophistication about how these health systems actually work and doing it early on. Thinking back to my residency days, you're sort of plunged into this matrix and you don't quite understand anything of what surrounds you other than the patient who sort of appears before you on any given minute. Let me say something about scholarly inquiry. The goals are to cultivate critical thinking skills, to formulate good questions, knowing where to seek information, how to analyze it, testing a hypothesis against evidence. And we hold these on, we sequester time on Wednesday afternoons for scholarly inquiry. And we've started with 5 tracks shown on the upper part of the slide. The 3 that are shown in light blue there, population health, clinical and translational research, and the design tracks, were all already well-developed co-curricular tracks that were introduced not too long after I got here to Jefferson. We're part of, for the more recent graduates on the call, you would know this as the college within the college program that Sue Ratner and I launched. And so that has been sort of continued on, but we've now added scholarly inquiry tracks in healthcare systems and humanities. So students will choose one of those 5 tracks. They'll have a number of didactic and other sessions around it, and then they differentiate. They'll find a mentor in one of our co-curricular pathways or in a lab, and then define a specific project for themselves. We're also contemplating additional tracks, and those are shown below in the slide: medical education, health policy, computational sciences, creativity. And I'll have a little bit more to say about the computational sciences one near the end of this presentation. And so the scholarly work will go on through 4 years, include lectures, seminars, workshops, and they'll benefit from advising and mentoring. And our first class, the current class of 2021, already has just chosen their tracks. And you'll note that 166 out of 270 students decided to go into the hardcore research approach, which frankly surprised us and sort of gives lie to this notion that you come to Jefferson just to get clinical training. Clearly, students are coming here with a deep interest in research as well. You'll also note that this very unique design track, combining medicine plus design, we're limited in the number of students, so we fill that group to capacity each time, and those are 25 students. And then you see the rest on that slide. And it plays out over the first 2 years as shown on this slide. In November, they'll select a track. Between November and February, they identify advisors and projects. They get to do a literature review. And starting in March of this coming year through May, they'll start project implementation. Students will have the option to continue that project in the summer, finish it in the fall, and importantly, the exercise of presenting their work and learning how to do so effectively in an oral presentation and abstracts and posters will be part of the training through scholarly inquiry. Many of you already know this because we emphasize this often. What we're very, very proud of is the immersion in humanities. Many of you know Sal Mangione, who's sort of an iconic Jefferson faculty member, and he's just created this rich array of humanities offerings. Shown here, Introduction to Creative Writing, Visualizing Anatomy, the Empathy Project with the Lantern Theater Company, where the students write plays and then act in them with the local theater company actors, and so on, the Medical Cineforum, etc. And the change under JeffMD is we are now requiring students to complete at least 2 of these selectives during phase 1 of JeffMD. Empowering health through connecting clinic to community, that clinical experience becomes important. And here we've done a significant change early on. It used to be if you're a first-year student, you're lucky if you were a duckling trailing behind the attending and not really allowed to get anywhere really near a patient. Well, that's changing, and we ask the question, what are the meaningful things that a first-year student right from the get-go can do? And that includes providing service to patients and families, and being part of sort of the social context of that patient and doing work with them together with social workers in doing embeds. And so that's part of what the students are doing from the get-go in year 1, which starts to get them sensitized to connecting clinic to community and really understanding the patients that they're seeing, where they come from, and how all of that happens. Phase 2 blocks are shown here. That has yet to start, obviously, because we're only in the first year. Shortly after I got to this medical college, I introduced the idea of doing a requirement in neurology during the clinical rotation year. The big change in JeffMD is that we've now introduced emergency medicine as a core rotation. And the other big change is normally you would have students scramble. So you might be next to a student who already had done internal medicine neurology, you had already done family medicine, and then you're both coming into surgery, where you're coming with very different backgrounds. And how do you really assess students, compare students, et cetera? So the key innovation here is students will travel through the clinical blocks in phase 2 together. So they will all have seen the same things previously. Obviously, they're starting at different points. So some will start in internal medicine, others in surgery, others in family medicine, others in OBGYN. But then that group will rotate as a block through the system. And of course, we're still 2.5 years away from phase 3, but there's a lot of active planning in terms of these general pathways, and these aren't locked in stone, so this should have a big draft on it. But shown here are some of the pathways, the broader pathways that we're considering as we go through this. And then the phase 3 core requirements in that last year will include an inpatient medicine sub-internship, outpatient experiences that are pathway, sub-pathway specific, often geared to subspecialty. And also we're going to build on our considerable success in a gateway to internship approach to really make sure that I keep getting those calls from top residency program directors every August where they tell me the best students who applied once again this year and the most sophisticated ones were the ones coming from your medical college. Key in this, since we're coming up with a new curriculum, is to get competency assessment built in right from the get-go. The AAMC has defined 8 competencies for medical colleges. Those are shown here. And so assessment becomes a critical part of what we're building in here. And assessing those competencies will be not only the knowledge for practice competencies shown in that big light blue bar, but all the other competencies, professionalism, systems-based practice, all the other ones that I mentioned, interprofessional collaboration, etc. And we'll be able to monitor that and track that. And the important advantage in JeffMD is rather than just doing multiple choice tests to assess students, there are a variety of modalities, a rich variety to assess students, weekly quizzes, block exams, reflective writing, and so on, that you see here on this slide. And importantly, I point out the CBL faculty meeting every block, as well as where faculty compare notes, as well as this peer assessment idea. A number of med schools, have been excited about peer assessment. Well, we're there, and we're probably going to do a bit of leapfrogging. And then we're also quite excited about this new competency assessment tool. Since it's at Jefferson, it's Jeff something, so we're calling it Jeff Cat. We're developing it with an outside company that we've already had experience working with well, EMS. And that means every student will have a dashboard like this, where they'll be able to say, how are they doing against each of the competencies, and how does that, and where do they have a weakness, allows them to identify areas that need buffing up. We can identify those areas. And remember, this is not just competencies for knowledge and facts, it's also of other, the cross-cutting areas that I've mentioned. So we're now in the late winter, and what have we learned so far in this first year of our JeffMD journey? First of all, it's been an overwhelming success of the case-based learning format. That's a good idea for the dean's job security, because when you completely blow up an old curriculum that was working, there's quite a bit of risk in that. And the amazing thing is that when new instructors meet these students, remember, they're just first-year students, they're dumbfounded. It has not been uncommon for faculty to say, I thought they were third year, because they are talking and analyzing and thinking about cases at this incredibly advanced, sophisticated level before they've even seen a lot of the organ systems. There's high level of engagement of faculty and students, criticality of well-written learning objectives. The students have developed a bit of a love-hate relationship with those weekly quizzes on Fridays, but they're getting used to the idea. And I mentioned the tight bonding. That turns out to be a major, largely for me at least, unanticipated dividend, just how that bonding experience would occur. And it's not just among students, but it's also between students and faculty. So now in a medical school that has rather large class size, you now individualize it in yet another way by these good, strong relationships. And when I'm around the country talking to many of you, one of the things that you remember most fondly of at Jefferson is those faculty that you bonded with along the way. So lessons learned, we were too heavily scheduled for active learning, and we'll incorporate that experience into designing it again for the incoming students. Too much material in some lectures labs. Some of the faculty said, I used to give 3 lectures, now you just gave me 1. Well, I'll try to put all 3 lectures into that 1. That doesn't quite work. So we'll enforce that a little more rigorously. Need better mapping of multiple choice questions to learning objectives, need better integration of health system science and evidence-based medicine. And then we're doing continuous fine-tuning. We need to add new cases and change sequencing for the incoming class, streamlining lecture and lab content, but really importantly, what I'd like to emphasize here is enriching faculty development with external forums. Not anyone, I know I would not find it natural to walk into a small group and run an effective Socratic session. So teaching the teachers was an incredibly important part of what the JeffMD leadership team undertook in preparing to launch it. And I think in no small part, the success to date has been the attention to the faculty and getting them up to speed. But importantly, that's not just a one-time thing. So we're looking to continuously enrich faculty development, sending them to particular seminars, courses, and other events around the country to continuously develop. One of the things that tells us we're succeeding is of the 22 CBL instructors, well, actually I don't remember the exact number, but all but one signed up eagerly to do it again for next year. So we've gone to a situation now where faculty are literally fighting for the opportunity to be part of this and to run small groups along the way. Just let me close with just a couple of additional comments here on these last two slides. The gift, the incredible gift from Sidney Kimmel has allowed us to do a number of really important things, and our Office of Institutional Advancement has been doing really a brilliant job in leveraging those dollars to do a number of things. I remind you, because you may have heard me talking about this before, the amazing thing about Sidney Kimmel's gift is he left it very open-ended. He said, use it how you see fit to further elevate this great medical college. We decided ourselves and the leadership team to actually restrict it a bit in its use. We wanted to be sure that a majority of the dollars were used towards endowment, so it would keep giving and doing it to a match. And so the institutional advancement crew here, Rebecca among them, sitting right here, have just been doing a great job in helping build a portfolio of endowed professorships. We call it distinguished professorships, shown in that bottom box. But at the same time, what we told Sidney Kimmel is that our ambition is to stand up an Institute for Advanced Study, in a sense, a biomedical equivalent for the incredible Princeton Institute for Advanced Study. And a key part of that is not just having endowed distinguished professors at your institute, but it's having these visiting scientists and scholars, people who are thought leaders in fields coming to spend 1, 2, 3, or even 4 months on campus, embedded with students and enriching the campus, setting up collaborations, etc. And this is the year we are really going to be giving life to that component of this idea of the Institute for Advanced Study, in particular this idea of the scholars program. The other thing that I'd end on here and then take a look at some of your questions is, and this ties into the merger with Philadelphia University. I gave a webinar such as this a while back to explain the merger with Philadelphia University. Now part of Thomas Jefferson University. One of the merger theses, just one of literally 2 or 3 dozen, was this idea that we're going into an age when computational thinking, not computer sciences, this is distinct, computational thinking, data science, has to be thought of as a core language, just like we had to take when we're in school, either French or Spanish or Latin or something like that. The language requirement for students at this university will have to be computational thinking, data sciences. Not that they're going to all be computational types, but they'll have to know how to deal with that sort of thing. And so to create that platform in the medical college, we've been building a number of initiatives, exciting initiatives in the computational science area, and those are shown here. For instance, computational medicine under this phenomenal faculty member, Isidore Ragusos, who came here from IBM, into DNA and RNA analytics, looking at high-dimensional gene data sets. There's a lot of excitement now about launching a digital health institute, medical devices powered by artificial intelligence and robotics with Adam Dicker. Leveraging David Nash's incredible strengths here in population health for something that he likes to call population health intelligence. How do you analyze big data related to health of population? And then there's incredible work going on in our imaging departments, radiology here in particular, in using artificial intelligence and other deep learning tools to look at images. So we're creating a very 21st century platform to address some of these other components. And then I'll end it there. And now it's our opportunity to answer some questions. So thank you for your attention. It's great having you online, and let's see what may have come in here.
All right. So with this first question, are you concerned, Dr. Tykocinski, that this new curriculum will be adversely perceived by residency programs that might affect a student's competitiveness?
Yeah, great question. So obviously, there's the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. So when we do something like this, the first question is we had to assure ourselves there was a reason for doing this, and then the two things we can't afford to break is, number one, the performance of the student on the required step exams, step 1, step 2, etc. And the other one is getting into residency programs. And so when we look around the medical colleges, it should be clear that in some sense, we're almost late to the game. If you look at the 145 or so allopathic med schools in the United States, a vast majority of them have already been updating curricula and doing all kinds of curricular innovation. In fact, when we went through our last accreditation 3 to 4 years ago, we had a concern of maybe they would flag us for not moving along. So there was no question we had to do something. And we had the advantage of drawing on a lot of people's experiences and doing it. Obviously, we're not going to know the answer to this until those students get to apply to residencies, but I can tell you the students are enthusiastic. New applicants are getting an incredibly favorable impression, and so we know they're not being scared off by it. And when we talk to residency program directors around the country and share what we're doing, it really is generating excitement, actually. So we're feeling very comfortable that we're on the right track here. But obviously, this is the name of the game. We've always been proud of the incredible performance of our graduates in terms of getting into residency programs, and we'll be monitoring that very closely.
Great. And another question we have is, will there be flexibility built in to allow students to study in other labs and programs that offer specialty research opportunities, such as NIH, colleges, et cetera?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, on the ones that are particularly keyed in on more hardcore basic and translational research, you'll notice on that slide there were 166 students doing that. Well, they're going to head off not just into, one of our 140 or 150 different principal investigators and, labs on campus, but they will have as much opportunity to embed within other colleges within the university, and we're going to be very open to their doing experiences elsewhere. We've had an unusual track record, for instance, in our students getting NIH given scholarships to go and do research, spend a year at NIH and other things. So we're opening up possibilities for co-mentorship, where one of their mentors could be at NIH or some other university or medical school, and they would be co-mentored with us. So the name of the game is flexibility, as long as we're confident that the mentor has a clear charge and is going to be accountable to us in tracking the student's development and performance.
Well, great. We want to do one more call for questions. We have the time, so if you have anything, please let us know. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So we just received one that asked, will any focus exist on the recruitment and retention of minority students in these programs?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So we have this is a challenging area for us historically, but we can continue to work at it really, I would even use a word that's a little hyperbolic here, assiduously. I mean, we really are doing a lot of work in this area. You know, when President Klasko assumed the presidency of the university about 5 years ago, he established the first ever enterprise-wide position overlooking diversity around campus. Joseph Hill, a very outstanding individual, has been leading that charge, and who has reported directly to the president. So that already tells you the importance there. I started within the Sidney Kimmel Medical College. I started a diversity forum. It's now been grown under Bernie Lopez as associate dean, and an incredible amount of great programming, et cetera, which looks at all the different dimensions. What is the experience of minority students while they're here? What are we doing to recruit and that sort of thing? So there's a lot of energy and time and programming being invested into that. And we've had, you know, we're starting to have some successes in that area. Obviously, role modeling is critical, and so we're pressing our chairs really hard in terms of minority recruitment at the faculty level, because that, it's by definition, will then also help you in terms of students and what we can do in recruiting them there. I just would end my comment on that question with you know, something that may seem obvious to some, which is the tuition discount rate is a real challenge for us. We simply don't have anywhere near the amount of scholarship dollars that we need for our students. So we are very, very robust and aggressive in terms of making offers to students, minority students here, but often we'll lose out when it comes to the package that we can put together. There was a fantastically generous donor that created the Baxter Scholarships in recent years, which are full freight scholarships for regional minority students, and that has been wonderful. We need more of that sort of thing. So I mentioned the Kimmel endowment dollars for professorships, but we've committed somewhere around a third in match towards endowed scholarships for students, and we're making headway. We're on a trajectory to get there, and that will be critical for, you know, attempts our plans and goal of diversifying the student body.
Great. And I'd also like to add that we did an online event with Dr. Lopez on diversity and inclusion in healthcare and here at Jefferson that is on our YouTube channel, so we can send that out to you as well. I want to let everyone know that this presentation is also being recorded, so we'll be on our YouTube channel and we will email it out to everyone after the event. So I just wanted to give one more call for any questions. If you think of anything after the presentation is over, you can always email us at alumni@jefferson.edu. So we do have one more question that came in. Do you believe this curriculum will bring more primary care physicians into practice?
Yeah, so the answer is the experiment is in progress. So I can't definitively say this in one direction or the other. The curriculum, you know, historically Jefferson has really distinguished itself by not skewing its emphasis towards specialties and the subspecialties. Certainly preparing, you know, incredible people going into the subspecialties, but also valuing and bringing, you know, cultivating incredible physicians who are going into primary practice. So that's at the core of what we are. We have no intention of moving away from that. I think what I'd like to think is that the way we've configured JeffMD and the cross-cutting disciplines and exposures will essentially prepare students to be ever more effective physicians when they go out and practice the primary care medicine in what will undoubtedly be a very, very different way out there. There's no question about it. Whether some of our alumni want to hear this or not, the writing's on the wall. Telehealth is going to become a big part of healthcare delivery. Jefferson, under Steve Klasko, has really embraced this. I think we had more telehealth visits than any other academic medical center in the country, so we've been pioneering that area. So telehealth will certainly have an important role and interface with primary care, as just one example. So, yeah, the curriculum under JeffMD continues to equally validate primary care as well as the subspecialties, and we'll track that. We're going to monitor that quite closely.
I feel like I keep plugging our online programs, but we also did a telehealth program as well for our alumni.
Okay,
this is great. So we're getting toward the end of the evening, so if you have any more questions, please feel free to submit them now before we say goodnight. Guess you covered everything rather well. I wonder if anyone's typing anything right now. Well, all right. Well, again, if anyone has any questions that they think of after the fact, please feel free to email us at alumni@jefferson.edu, and we can pass those along to Dr. Tykocinski. But I want to say thank you again for joining us and leading this discussion, Dr. Tykocinski, and for everyone joining us from all over the United States this evening. Again, it will be recorded, but thank you all again, and have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, I'd like to add, especially for those of you in Oregon, California, Utah, so we have just a great representation here this evening. So thanks to all of you, and look forward to seeing you in person at future events.
Great. Thank you and good night.